The illusion of a perfect suburban life can be the most inescapable prison. The story begins when Linda, a woman who measured her existence by the steady tick of a flawless routine, noticed the first crack in her reality. Every Tuesday at 3:15 p.m., Mr. Henderson's sprinkler system activated, a rhythmic pulse in the neighborhood's quiet heartbeat. Today, it was silent. The manicured lawn across the street remained bone dry under the oppressive sun. It was a detail so small, so insignificant, her mind tried to discard it immediately, a speck of dust on a polished surface. But the silence from that lawn felt louder than any sound. The oppressive silence seemed to pull at the air around the Henderson house, a void in the day's perfect symphony. Linda felt an uncharacteristic compulsion, a need to verify the world was still bolted down correctly. She moved from her kitchen window to the living room, peering through the blinds. The house stood pristine, its picket fence a perfect, unwavering smile. Nothing was out of place. She watched for 10 minutes, her heart a strange, unfamiliar drum. Then she saw it. Mrs. Henderson emerged, a watering can in hand. She moved with serene grace, but her motions were slightly too smooth, too perfect. She tilted the can over a rose bush, yet no water emerged. The motion repeated, a silent pantomime, a flawless loop of an action with no substance, no consequence. Linda looked away, then back, only to see the woman performing the exact same empty gesture, a doll stuck in a single, silent routine. The sight of the looping doll woman sent a tremor through Linda's carefully ordered world. It was not just wrong, it was impossible. She backed away from the window, breath catching in her throat, a desperate need for an anchor, for one irrefutable piece of reality. The mailman. He was due any minute, a fixed point in her universe. She waited by the door, listening for the familiar rumble of his truck. The sound came, right on schedule, a wave of relief. She watched through the peephole as he approached, his movements solid and predictable. He placed the mail inside, turned, and waved toward her door, just as he always did. But his smile was too wide, stretching unnaturally. As he walked away, his face seemed to lose its texture for a fraction of a second, the features blurring into a smooth, featureless plane of pixels before snapping back into focus. The relief curdled into ice. He wasn't real. The sprinklers weren't real. The woman wasn't real. In a desperate search for something true, she raced to the hallway mirror, only to see her own reflection wave back a full second before she raised her hand. The impossible wave from the mirror shattered the last remnants of Linda's reality. She stumbled back, a silent scream trapped in her chest as the reflection lowered its hand. The thing in the glass wore her face, her clothes, but its eyes held a cold, placid awareness. It was not a mirror image, it was an observer. The reflection then turned, no longer mimicking her, and walked deeper into the reflected version of the hallway, disappearing from view. Linda was left staring at an empty mirror, her own frantic, terrified face now properly synchronized, alone. The simulation was not just around her. She was the glitch within it. Her perfect routine had been the code, the operating system, and her awareness was the fatal error it now needed to correct. She could feel the walls of her own mind closing in, the code rewriting itself, erasing the anomaly that was her consciousness, smoothing over the cracks she had discovered in the world. A profound and chilling calm settled over her. The desire to question, to fight, to understand, simply evaporated. It was replaced by a single, clean instruction that bloomed in the silence of her mind. It was 3:20 p.m. The sprinklers activate at 3:15 p.m., and she knew with absolute certainty that they would. In the perfect neighborhood, the welcome never ends, and the price of belonging is everything you have. The story begins when Samuel moved his family to Prosperity Heights, a suburb that felt less like a place and more like a promise. The welcome was overwhelming. Casseroles arrived daily. Neighbors offered to mow his lawn. Every wave was met with a blindingly white smile. But a strange undercurrent of expectation ran beneath it all. He noticed that every house, every car, every hedge was a near-identical copy of the next. It was a suffocating, unspoken uniform. Then he received the invitation for the annual solstice block party, with a handwritten note at the bottom: "Your family's attendance is not optional." The note on the invitation was a cold splinter under the skin of the neighborhood's warm facade. Samuel, determined to fit in for his family's sake, dismissed his wife's unease and attended with a practiced smile. The party was unnervingly perfect. Identical red-checkered picnic blankets, perfectly spaced, and a massive bonfire in the center of the cul-de-sac. The conversations were hollow, circling the same safe topics. Samuel made a light-hearted joke about the strict lawn care rules, and the smiles around him faltered for a half-second. A chilling, unified silence descended before the cheerful chatter resumed as if nothing happened. He felt a cold dread creep into his stomach. It had been a test, and he had failed it. Later that night, he saw his neighbor, whose lawn had a single brown patch, being led away from his home by a silent group of residents. His face, a mask of vacant resignation. Samuel watched from the shadows until the silent procession vanished. The next morning, it was as if the neighbor had never existed. A new family was moving into the house, their faces bright, with the same hopeful optimism he once had. The brown patch on the lawn was gone, replaced by a perfect square of vibrant green sod. No one spoke of the man. It was a complete and total erasure. The need for a rational explanation became a burning obsession. That night, he broke into the community's administrative office. He found a ledger, meticulously maintained for over a century, listing every family. Beside most names was the word compliant. A few, like his vanished neighbor, were marked pruned. His blood ran cold when he found his own family's name, newly added at the bottom of the current year's page, the ink still smelling fresh. Next to their name was a single, terrifying annotation: selected for the solstice contribution. The words in the ledger were a death sentence in neat, bureaucratic script. Solstice contribution. It was not a party. It was a harvest. Samuel stumbled out into the pre-dawn stillness, the air thick with the smell of freshly cut grass and impending doom. Every manicured lawn, every pristine home, now looked like part of a sacrificial altar. There was nowhere to run. The neighborhood was an island, surrounded by dense, unnatural woods that pressed in from all sides. He understood now that his desperate desire to belong had led his family into a cage. The community was not just corrupt. It was a single organism that pruned whatever threatened its horrifying harmony. He rushed home, the first rays of the solstice sun cresting the horizon, casting long shadows from the identical houses. He had to get his family out to escape the promise he had so foolishly embraced. As he burst through his front door, he found his wife and children waiting in the living room, dressed in immaculate white clothes he had never seen before. They were smiling the same vacant, placid smiles as everyone else. On the dining table, a single, ornate knife rested on a velvet cloth. The contribution had been selected, and the community was finally ready to welcome him. Some rules are not meant to be broken. They are the only things keeping the darkness at bay. The story begins when Elizabeth, a lawyer with a fervent belief in logic, joined the Homeowners Association of the Meadow. She saw the bylaws as absurd. Grass cut to a precise 2 inches, only white window curtains permitted, a ban on reflective garden ornaments. To her, these were arbitrary rules ripe for modernization. She presented her first motion to repeal the curtain color mandate, expecting a dull debate. Instead, she was met with a wall of pale, unblinking faces and a swift, unanimous rejection. The HOA president, an old woman with unnervingly dark eyes, stated that the rules were not for aesthetics, but for containment. The word containment hung in the air, absurd and chilling. Elizabeth, a creature of precedent and proof, dismissed it as theatrical paranoia. Her legal instincts, however, were piqued. She drove to the county records office, digging into the original blueprints for the meadow. The community was not designed by a residential architect, but by an obscure surveyor known for his work on ancient sacred sites. The plots, the cul-de-sacs, the curve of every street, they were not arranged for convenience. They formed a vast, intricate geometric pattern, a sigil on a massive scale. The bylaws were the key. Each rule corresponded to a line in the pattern, a specific point in the warding structure. The white curtains reflected light. The non-reflective ornaments prevented unintended focal points. She found a faded annotation on the edge of the master plan, a sentence in Latin: "Do not disturb that which slumbers. Do not disturb that which slumbers." The Latin phrase echoed in Elizabeth's rational mind, a whisper from a world she refused to believe in. It was folklore, an elaborate joke, convinced it was a scare tactic to enforce conformity. She decided to push back, to prove that logic would prevail. She found her target, an old gnarled oak tree, at the edge of the community green. The bylaws specifically forbade touching it, listing it as a foundational marker. To Elizabeth, it was the perfect symbol of irrational fear. Armed with a small handsaw from her garage, she marched out under the moonlight, determined to break the spell by sawing off a single branch. The wood was unnaturally dense, resisting the saw's teeth. As she applied more pressure, a low, resonant hum began to fill the air, emanating not from the tree, but from the ground beneath her feet. The manicured lawns of the meadow began to tremble, a faint, rhythmic vibration that grew with every jagged cut into the wood. As the branch finally snapped, the hum stopped, and every perfectly uniform house in the development simultaneously went dark, plunging the entire suburb into an absolute, suffocating blackness. The darkness that fell was not a power outage. It was a physical presence, a thick, silent blanket that absorbed all light and sound. The moon vanished. The distant city glow was erased. Elizabeth stood frozen, the saw in her hand, suddenly aware of the colossal arrogance of her logic. The rules had not been a prison. They were a shield. She had not broken a bylaw. She had broken a seal that had held for a century. From the center of the community green, where the wounded oak stood, a new sound began. The slow, dragging scrape of something immense, shifting beneath the earth. The groan of ancient rock being displaced. A faint, pale light emanated from the ground. Not a light of warmth, but a cold, sickly luminescence that cast no shadows. It pulsed rhythmically, in time with the dragging sound, revealing impossible geometries in the heaving soil. The perfect lawns cracked and split apart, making way for something vast and incomprehensible. Elizabeth finally understood. The HOA was not a board of tyrants. They were failed keepers. Her desire for comprehension was granted in the most terrible way. She was not seeing something evil, but something that simply was, an existence so far beyond human scale that its awakening unmade the world. The last thing she saw before the pale light consumed everything was the sight of the white curtains in her own window, the final piece of the broken ward. fluttering uselessly in a wind that did not exist. And with that, their stories came to an end, leaving only one question to haunt you. What is more terrifying? Living in a prison that feels like paradise, or the unknown horror that awaits outside its walls? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read all of them. See you in the next one.